again. My name is Gabrielle Brooks, and I would like to welcome you to the UAC Artist Workshop Series, Session 2, Preparing for an RFQ. Thank you to everyone who has joined us this evening. Again, this is going to be not a super formal thing, so if you have questions along the way, please feel free to ask. But if you would like to hold them to the end for a more detailed answer, you could do that as well. So thank you again. And I'd like to introduce tonight's co-instructors. We have from our UAC team, Brittany Boyd-Bullock, who is helping us in a consulting way and has been very instrumental in the production of this workshop series. And then we have our artist, our co-instructor with us, Tony Hawkins, who is here. He is a current UAC artist working on a mural in Westwood, and we're excited to hear about what he can tell about his experience so far and just his process in general when it comes to proposals and creating his application. Image because it features our co-instructor this evening and a wonderful mural that he finished at the Whitehaven Community Center last year, right? Last year or earlier this year. I don't know what time is sometimes. But with that, I would like to go ahead and we'll be getting started tonight with our agenda, which covers resumes, portfolios, letter of interest, and how to research the call to get started creating all of that. And I will pass to my lovely co-host, Brittany Boyd-Bullock.
Hey, y'all. This mic intimidates me a little bit, but here we are. Okay, so the first topic that we want to cover today is around resumes and CVs, okay? And so the first thing that we want to do with each of these topics is to define it, right? A resume simply is your qualifications on paper, right? Typically is a one-pager, typically includes your education and other work experience, right? And so when you think about applying for any kind of public art project, one of the things that they ask is for a resume or a CV. So we want to make sure that you see some examples, you understand what your resume or CV might look like as you're thinking about applying for public art. One of the things that I would say as you're thinking about this is, you know, some of us have a lot of work experience within the art space and some of us may not. And that's okay, right? And so we're going to talk about what that looks like from a resume perspective, right? Then we're also going to just touch on CVs, right, which are, oh, we're not on this slide yet, but okay. So here we are. So when you apply for a public art project, either of these are okay, right? They're acceptable to submit. There's not one that supersedes the other, right? There's not one that's better than the other. They're just different. And we want to make sure that you understand the difference, right? So a resume, typically 1 page. We'll show you some examples of that today. And then a CV, typically 2 to 3 or more pages, depending on your level of experience. Okay, is that pretty straightforward? Any thoughts or questions about that? Okay. So when you are applying for a public art piece, right? So for instance, I've been working since I was 14 years old, and my first job was at Baskin-Robbins, okay? Now, is that on my resume when I apply for public art? No, right? Because it doesn't necessarily correlate. It doesn't really relate to what I'm applying for, right? However, if I worked at Baskin-Robbins and I don't have a whole lot of work experience or experience period, and I somehow got to make the ice cream cakes, and that attention to detail, right, is now something that I incorporate in my art, that is a way in which you could talk about it in your letter of interest, and we're going to talk about that too. So the point that I'm making here is that maybe all of your experience doesn't need to go on the resume, but if there is something that is specific to the call, right, put it there and then be able to talk about that in your letter of intent, okay? So just keep that in mind. Everything may not need to go. You want to hit the next slide? Or you want to share anything else about that?
Oh, I just wanted to add another reminder that when we receive a lot of this information, we always want to check and make sure that the websites, the email addresses, the phone numbers that you've listed are accurate and true and work, because we want to make sure that we're able to communicate with you. So just making sure, double checking every time, anywhere that you apply for, that everything you have listed is your current and most accessible way to get a hold of you.
Can we go back real quick? I was just going to add. So just to let y'all know, the way we're going to kind of do the style that we're doing is their perspective will be kind of the perspective of UAC from the behind the table when you guys are submitting. I'm going to try to give you the perspective as an artist who has come into the space of as a public artist, who has already had a career as an artist already, as a professional artist, and I moved into public art. So I'll tell you here for resume, my suggestion for you. My suggestion when you're doing your resume as an artist is to go ahead and categorize your projects. What are your mural-based projects? What are your portrait projects? What are your graphic projects? Have those things already separated, categorized, so that when you get ready to do your resume, if you're applying to a mural-based open call, you're pulling from your mural projects. You don't want to pull from a lot of portrait projects if you're doing a mural call. So have those things already kind of weeded out, have them ready and accessible, and have that file editable so you can just go in and change it so that it applies to whatever you're kind of applying to. You want to make sure that you are marketing yourself as close to the call as possible. So yeah, you want to have a general resume, but make sure that you're able to tailor that resume to fit whatever you're trying to do. Another thing is when you're looking at your, well, I don't know how we can go back to this. I was going to talk about connecting your images with your resume.
Yeah. So your CV, which is also called a curriculum vitae, which is Latin for course of life, literally means everything you've ever done. Everything you've ever done, which is why it's typically 2 to 3 pages long, sometimes more. With your CV, oftentimes you're including things like even travel, right? If you've done some traveling abroad related to your work, or, even going abroad. Like on my CV, I have that I've gone to Spain to visit the Picasso Museum, right? That's related, right? So CV is everything. In your CV, you want to list your awards, your grants, your residencies, your recognitions, your publications, right? And when you're listing these types of things like publications and so forth, you want to make sure you have a link that someone can click on to even get to that article, right? Those types of things. So your CV is any and everything you've ever done, right? Typically way longer. Again, there's no one that is preferred over the other. It's just if you have a bit more experience, maybe you need a CV. If not, a resume is fine. I would.
I would too.
I would,
Yeah.
as a studio assistant for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Outlining their practice and or what your role was in that with that artist in that studio. I would definitely do, because I would say for a couple of reasons. The first is it shows quite quickly that you could work with other people, right? Secondly, it shows that you might have picked up some additional skills or techniques that are not traditionally within your practice, but you know how to do as a result of working with another artist. To me, I would always put that.
And actually, you brought up a good point too, and that goes back to resume. Start assessing yourselves now. Start looking at what your resume looks like now. Start, have an honest conversation with yourself. Are you happy with your resume? Are you happy with your CV? If you're not, that's a good point. If you have worked with other artists, say for instance on mural projects, put that on your resume if you feel like that applies to it. If you don't have mural projects already under your belt, this is the time you can go ahead and start building up your resume by helping with other artists' projects. People are always looking for people to help them with their mural projects. You can definitely put that on your resume. So it's a good point you brought up.
It's okay if you look at your things and you don't love them. That happens a lot. Even if you just worked on it 6 months ago and you loved what you created, maybe this next project or this next opportunity sparks a different way to display what you've done, to tell your story, and so you may scrap everything and start over and have a new perspective. So it's okay to feel like, man, I need to work on my website, or I have not created my artist statement. What is my statement? It's okay to start there and be ready to ask yourself those questions and figure out what works for you so that you have a template to work from in the future.
And last thing I will say about that is use your resume and or your CV as a teaching tool, right? So if you are applying for a mural project and you don't have much experience with that, then you know that, okay, if I'm going to continue to apply for mural projects, I might need to get some experience under my belt, which also might mean that, okay, should I do a free mural for my aunt in her bathroom, right? Or is there an opportunity for me to get a blank wall to just kind of play a little bit so I can, have some experience, right? And so oftentimes, those of us who've worked in these public spaces, we have to start somewhere, right? And sometimes we have to get a little bit of experience so that we can apply for the big things. So just keep that in mind.
So a portfolio is a slide deck of your most recent work. At UAC, you'll see in our calls to artists that we normally ask for 10 to 20 images of your work. And so while that may seem like a lot, this doesn't mean that it has to be 20 different projects. It could be that you have 5 well-documented projects that each have 5 images with them to show the scale, to show detail images, pan out, zoom in, drone shot, whatever it is that you need to do to really highlight what you've accomplished and showcase each individual project to the best of your ability. That's why we keep that number pretty high there, because some applications you'll see it's 3 to 5 images or up to 7 images, and it may not give the most encompassing amount of space for you to tell your story, to showcase what you've done. Consider when choosing your images the lighting, clarity, the details of your work. Are the images from a project that was 10 years ago? Can you access that project and update those images? Are you able to put a clear description of what the project was, include dimensions of that project, things that help showcase scale, especially if you have not completed a large-scale public art project before or a large-scale mural, being able to showcase, okay, what is the largest project I have done and what are the dimensions on that? And even if you could include an image that gives some scale to it, that's always great to do. You can see that this image is great quality. It's high quality image. It's got dimensions listed. It's got the medium that was used and 72 by 96, that's pretty large, right? But if you are me, I don't necessarily always know what that means. I just know it's big. So you may need to include an image for scale. Yeah, put your hand next to it, something. If you've got it in a gallery already, incredible opportunity to get a scale image. And so it just provides a little more context, helps people to, somebody who doesn't know dimensions off the top of their head, it just helps them to see, okay, you have done something large before.
So with my images, I'll start by saying this. These specific images that I pulled for this slide were from an open call that I did in Dallas, Texas. And so I bring that up because when we talk about your portfolio, the same things that we're saying here will be applicable no matter where you are. And it works. And I learned this from UAC, being intentional about what you're putting in there, like I said earlier. All of the images that I used for this call were all mural-based. Even though I have a lot of other types of images, I did all mural-based images. Not only did I do mural-based images, but I tried to do images that were connected to a community the best I could, because this particular call that I was going for was talking about community, and it was a staple in this call. And so I used this one because obviously it's a community call. This one's pretty standard. It's just a mural on brick. We can go to, the first one. So this one, I want to talk about this one real quick. If you are a large-scale mural artist like me, sometimes it can be really difficult for you to really capture a large-scale mural. Even here, it's not really the best because it's almost impossible to really showcase a wall that is 300 feet. This wall is 300 feet long, and this is technically only half of the mural. So what I did, because this particular call only had spaces for 5 pictures, I cheated. So I made one image that had close-ups. So being creative with how you're giving your images in that portfolio can make or break the way that they're viewing your portfolio. If I had only put that top image in there, they would not have known what I was painting. So I did the best I could to give them close-ups in that same image. So just think about how you can be creative if you're limited to only a few pictures, okay? We can go to, isn't there one more? So I want to talk to you about number 3. Number 3 is really interesting, and I put it in here. I actually did use this for this call, again, community-based. So this mock-up, and I'm going to tell you guys this, but it's not happening. I don't think it's happening, and that's, we all know how that goes, right? When you think something's going to happen, it's not happening. So this mock-up was done for the YMCA in Whitehaven, all right? They commissioned me to do mock-ups for the front of the YMCA in Whitehaven. I added this into my portfolio because even though it was not fabricated, I wanted to showcase my ability to design murals. If you're an artist and you don't have mural experience and you're trying to break into public art mural-based projects and contracts, and you don't have that work like you were talking about, you've assisting is a great way to get that out there. However, you can also, to your point earlier, mock up any building in the city, in the world, and showcase your ability to design mural-based artwork. This can be just as effective, if not more effective, than some of the pieces that I've done that are actually have been fabricated, because you can control so much about what you're putting on there and what the content is and what the building is. And so just think about doing that when you're thinking about the breadth of your portfolio and what you're really marketing for yourself. Yep.
How did you make that?
Good question. Everybody has their own flavor of the day. Mine is Procreate. I love Procreate. If you are an artist and you don't know the best way to mock up your designs, start talking to other artists. Everybody has a way. I don't think that either one of y'all use Procreate like that, right?
No.
What do you use?
Adobe.
Yeah, most people use, I think, Adobe Suite. Adobe, let's be honest, like, even though I love Procreate, Adobe Suite is really the standard. If you're somebody who wants to align yourself with corporate America and maybe freelance in a corporate space, the standard is going to be Adobe. I do not, if I'm doing a mural, I do the entire design on Procreate before I even do the mural, and I show them so that there's no question about what it's going to be. And my murals are about 90% of what I do in Procreate. Everything I do is in Procreate. That's just me though. But my point is that you should start to develop a relationship with some type of graphic-based something, because it's such a tool for you. And the next session, not this session, but the next session is going to talk about the next phase in your public art process, which is after you get selected. So say I know y'all are, I'm assuming y'all are all like applying to the open calls that are out right now, right? Y'all know there are 4 out right now. So if you get selected as one of the finalists, the next thing they're going to want to see are mock-ups. What are you going to do? Now, yeah, you can be old school, and we have one artist in particular that's super dope, and she does her thing old school. Daniela. She's old school, super dope. She does graphic too, but she can like sit there and really do it with color pencils and everything. This is just a way for you to have mural art in your portfolio without actually having to have mural art. Y'all get what I'm saying?
You could also, when we're talking about like being more analog, right, which is pen to paper, you could also design whatever it is that you want to make. And then I've done several things, right? So I've drawn out what I want my piece to be, and I've actually cut it out, and I've made a little maquette in my studio where I'm like making walls, right, out of cardboard, right, and I'm putting in, so there's no, you can go straight, yeah, you can go straight digital, you can go back to analog, small scale sculpture, right? I've also drawn something out, and then I've uploaded it in Procreate. Well, my husband has. He uploaded it in Procreate, and then he placed it in in wherever I wanted the piece to be. So digital is a great path, a great lane. You could also, if you're not there yet, as you're learning, right, you could also do what you know as an analog person, and then cut that stuff out, literally cut it out yourself, put it in, create a space for it. I printed out images like a background wall, right, with nothing on it. I printed that out, paste that on the cardboard walls that I've created. Like you can, you know what I'm saying? Like do what you need to do, right? To make it work. Yeah. And then you can photograph that.
I think the main thing is don't limit yourself to the experiences that you've already had. If you have ideas and you have things you want to do, you can create it for yourself and use that in your portfolio.
Yeah. That's true.
The last image here, real quick, this is another just large scale. These were actually, these were pieces of wood that I hand cut and then mounted and then hand painted, and did some brick painting too, but it's mixed, kind of a mixed media piece. And it's large scale. So again, I use several images to make it work and show you kind of the whole breadth of the space. You can kind of tell that there's obviously a theme going here, and it's still community based. But these are all community based murals. You can see a common thread here. Try to make your portfolio, when you're being specific to a call, do the same thing I've done here, is try to make it specific to what they're asking for.
I was just going to make one more comment about utilizing the free resources that are already out here. If you don't have access to Adobe Suite, or you don't have just anything that has a price tag to it, there are normally free equivalents out there. Something that I use every day for my job is Canva, and I know Canva is free, and it also has a background remover for making your own vectors and just a lot of things that you can do. So we're not sponsored by Canva. I wish we could get a Canva sponsorship, but shout out to them because they really are making things accessible, and it's to me an easy user interface, and they have a lot of tutorials and videos out there if something does trip you up. And then there's a pro version if you do get the chance to invest a little more into it, that I feel is worth it. So finding things like that. If you don't know about WeTransfer is a great resource for just sending files, large-scale files across the internet. We know how long that can take sometimes and how tedious it can be trying to just get something to someone else. So WeTransfer is a great resource for that as well. So again, like Tony said, talking to other artists is a great resource in itself of finding things that other people are using that could easily help with whatever you're trying to achieve.
Can I say just one more thing about portfolio before we So I'll tell y'all something that happened to me. The first public art call that I answered, that I applied to, I didn't get it. And I was really, like, it was the one I wanted. Like, and I still kind of like, man. You know, it was a Whitehaven mural project, and I didn't get selected for it. And I came back and I asked the person that was managing that project at UAC, like, hey, was there anything that, like, any reason why I didn't get selected as a finalist or anything you saw? And she told me straight up. She was like, your portfolio, she was like, I know that your work is good. She's like, I can see your work is good. She was like, but I just really don't feel like your photos really show the quality of the work. Be honest with yourself. How old are these photos? Like, I know you probably have your favorite things that you did, like, back in the day, but what was the quality of the camera when you took that photo with your first iPhone back then? What was the lighting like? Like, we've gotten to such a space now where the expectation for quality is so high that you really need to have an honest conversation about what the quality of your portfolio looks like. If you are putting things in your portfolio that you took a picture of 5 to 10 years ago, or maybe even 3 years ago, and you still have access to it now, you should probably rephotograph it. Think about images that you may have access to that you maybe can rephotograph in a different way, a different space.
If you have any questions specifically around photographing your work, let's talk about it here in this space, and let's try to maybe debunk some of those thoughts that we have, because I think that, you know, we've got a little bit of experience under our belt of how we photograph, how we've gotten these projects, and so if we can help you in any way, we definitely want to do that. But I feel like there have been, you know, early on, I have not applied for something because I felt like my photos weren't straight, you know, and I know that that could be a thing. So if you have specific questions around how do we photograph work, how do we photograph paintings, how do we photograph things that are behind glass, which is a really big deal. Yes, yeah. And also, too, be mindful of the photographer that you're partnering with. Photographing people and photographing art are two different genres, yes. Two different lanes. Two different lanes, right? And you know, and that's fine, but just know, like, whoever you're going to partner with, know that just be in constant conversation with them, right? If it's not working, if it looks washed out, if it's, you know, the colors are not vivid enough, say what you need to say so you can get the photos that you need. But yeah, partnering with another photographer, bartering with other graphic designers and photographers is also a good thing. I've done that too. It's like, hey, put this photograph in Adobe, make it high res for me, and I'll make you a piece, right? So whatever you need to do.
I will say too, because y'all touched on a couple of things that I think are important as artists, from an artist's perspective. I know for me, I don't know if y'all have this problem, y'all may not have this problem, but for me, I had a problem. I have so many pieces out there that I did not take pictures of, or my pictures were so crappy, because I was so depleted, because I'm more mural based. I'm a mural based artist. So by the time I finished my work, I was so tired and ready to go. I just would take the crappiest pictures and snap it up and leave. And then I go back and look at it later like, damn, this is horrible. I think having the mindset in the beginning of the project to be intentional about how you photograph it, if you are photographing it yourself at the end, I think that's something you need to think about as an artist, changing your mindset around. Sorry, y'all. The other thing is, well, you're talking about like partnering with a photographer. Another mindset thing. I got to a certain point in my career where I decided I was going to start spending some money. I have some drone, that Whitehaven mural, I hired an artist and I did drone video of that mural. So considering taking some of your budget and dedicating it to the photography and the marketing, it is a great investment for you as an artist. I know, like, we're trying to be out here and live, but having the right and the proper professional photographs and videos of your work can get you that next, you know, 6-figure contract.
When you do stylize your portfolio and your documents that way, it actually helps to brand you a bit more, right? So I've seen proposals come through where I'm on page 9, but I know exactly who I'm looking at based on the stylization that they put together for me, right? So I think that it's fine as long as it doesn't take away from the work, right? So if you're gonna, you know, put some little not little, but you want to put some color to the background, a little icon or something like that. I think that's totally fine if you're going to be consistent with that to help kind of really stylize your proposal. I think those are actually quite nice. And I don't think that those are frowned upon in any way.
However, I will say this. I think it's a difference between stylizing. I could see somebody presenting your portfolio and you have a stylized, cohesive message, and you're using the stylization to kind of make your point about what you're trying to put out there. When you get to a point, though, when you're trying to stylize your image because you don't think it's strong enough, then you need to question if that image should be included. There are murals that I have done that I am not proud of. There are murals that I've done that weren't my choice of what the subject matter were. I don't include those. So maybe if you're not 100% confident with an image, think about, do you want to start stylizing and adding things to make it better because you're not confident about it, or should you just not use it at all? So just be careful, because the people that are making these decisions, they can tell the difference between the two.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
I think if the image can stand alone without the stylization, it's probably like, oh, I can use this. But if the stylizing actually enhances it, maybe that's one you're
Right, I agree with that.
Maybe that's a checkpoint that you could use.
Could it work by itself?
Yeah, does it work alone?
Yeah.
Something that I encountered this year was with a duo team submission that applied and have a very specific style and have a very specific way of creating their presentations. And I think that while it was beautiful and it represented them well, it didn't necessarily correlate with the ask for what they were going to be creating. And so along the way, I think it may have confused the selection committee. And I think from my perspective, something that we will talk about again in the next session, so I do hope I will continue to plug session 3 and the other 2, is that Tony Hawkins made a great point earlier about the selection committee being a varied group of people. There are artists, there are stakeholders from the project itself, so that could be a contractor, an architect, which I don't know if you guys know, but architects don't always see themselves as artists, so they do not always see the vision, and it's nice to have simple, clean things to go back and reference and not have any confusion. Again, letting the images tell the story. That's something that I'm big on as a photographer. I feel that if the photo needs too much explanation, then maybe it's not the photo that you thought it could be, depending on what your task at hand is or what you're trying to accomplish. But I do like the story to be told through the image, and I think what you said was absolutely true. If it's a 5-star meal, why add some sides to it, So we're into our third topic, letter of interest. I think this is one of the most important topics at hand because it allows people to get a full story of who you are, why you're interested. Your who, what, when, where, and why basically is sold through this letter of interest. And so I see Brittany looking at me. So did you want to? Did you? No, me? Okay.
If you want it, whatever.
Okay, so, but the letter of interest, I was like, I thought you might have something burning that you wanted to, no, okay. So the letter of interest is a major opportunity to sell your why, to let people know, you want to let them know your story, basically. And through the scope of work that's listed in the call, you want to align your story with what they're looking for. And it's your chance to do that. So if you are from that neighborhood, you are from whatever area is at hand for the project, if you have local history there, people that or just opportunities to showcase how you go or fit into this piece and can actualize their vision well. This is the time to put all of that together and on paper. And so to me, the entire application at the end should feel cohesive. So what you've referenced in your resume as far as what you've done should then maybe shine a little bit here in the letter of interest as, I've created this mural before and I'm doing it again, and this time it's for this neighborhood that, I grew up in and it really resonates with me. You can tell that full story, and I think I'm gonna steal it from you before you say it, but Tony made a great point earlier about if it's possible for you to correlate your resume or your CV with your portfolio images, that's great to have. See, so if you could even, number them of saying, I worked here and completed this and that's on my CV, then you can reference my portfolio image number 5 and you can see exactly where those two things aligned. Use language and terminology that non-artists will understand, because again, this selection committee is made up of many different people. Some people who know what a medium is, and some people who think that that's, when you're getting your fortune told. So you want to make sure that you are saying things in a way that everyone can easily understand and follow and understand your point, see your vision, see what you have decided to create for them. And I think it's interesting always for me to remember that when I'm writing my letter of interest, when I'm applying for these calls, that it's not about me. It really truly is about the community at hand, that I am a tool in the instrument of creating something for a neighborhood, for a group, and that it may not at the end represent my true style or the things that I love the most, but the thing that means the most in that experience is honoring what the community wanted and what the community needs. And so if that isn't how you feel when you read about a call to artists, I do encourage you to either find it or find another call to apply for, because these community-based public art projects last for a long time. I think I mentioned that in our first session. Some things can take up to 5 years. So if you don't want to be, or longer than that, depending. So if you don't want to be in a specific neighborhood, time, place, situation with those people or whatever it is that, you thought you on the front end were excited about, and then you get 2 years into it and it's like, 2 years is a long time for anything, but imagine 5 to 6 years. We have a project like that currently that we have been working diligently. It was no fault of anyone's. It was literally a sinkhole catastrophe thing that no one could have seen coming. So yeah, Mother Earth does things like that sometimes, or a pandemic could happen, or things could, there could be a concrete shortage. Concrete is actually very expensive right now because of delays and shortages from the pandemic. And so we're still feeling the effects of a lot of those things. And I just want to reiterate that it is very important for you to care about these projects.
So when you come to this point of the call, it might say letter of interest, it might say letter of intent, same thing, right? But it simply is a narrative, right? And so when you are thinking about writing you may also see LOI, which is the acronym of this, right? All same thing. You want to focus on, I would say 3 things specifically. Right. So the first is you want to make sure that in your LOI that you are outlining your prior experience. OK, with projects or a similar scope of projects, you just want to make sure that you're outlining that specifically. The second thing I would say is that you are outlining your approach and your practice to public art. Right. What's your ethos when it comes to public art? What's your philosophy when it comes to public art? Are you the public artist that really wants to work in community, and so every public art project that you plan to apply for is going to have a community engagement component, right? If so, talk about that, okay? The third thing I would say is, and just a reiteration, is of why are you interested in this project? Why are you here? Especially if you are not from that neighborhood, right? Why are you here? And that's okay. Right, if you're applying to a project that you're not, or an area, or be it Memphis or elsewhere, right? Tony mentioned he applied for a project in Dallas. He live in Memphis, right? But he has something that he wants to share with Dallas. And so your ability to articulate that in your LOI is key, okay? And so outlining and even headlining those things, my experience or just experience, you talk about that. Approach, talk about that. My interest, talk about, But those are 3 things that I would say specifically needs to be in your LOI, and it needs to be explicitly talked about and outlined, okay? Usually when you're doing a letter of intent or interest, it's usually 1 or 2 pages, right? It's usually not over that. Because remember, the selection committee, as we've said, is made up of various people who oftentimes are booked and busy. So they're not trying to read a novel, right? They're trying to read a 1-page letter of intent that gets to the point, okay? And be descriptive, right? When you talk about your approach, right, talk about how this correlates maybe to your studio practice or your personal, ethos, right? How you move about the world. Those are the kind of things that the selection committee wants to know. Because not only are they trying to understand whether or not you are capable of implementing this project, it's also like an interview. Can we work with this person? What is their disposition, right? How do they show up? It's a bit about that too. So try to articulate that as much as you can in your LOI. What you should not be doing, right? You should not be proposing in your LOI. You should not be submitting proposal images around what you plan to do for the project. You don't do that yet. You do that once you have been accepted to submit a request for a proposal. So your LOI is just, I'm staking my claim, this is why you should choose me. Okay?
And I'll add, I have a lot of thoughts about the letter of interest, and so I'll try to make it as condensed as I can. But I'll start off with this. When you're talking about your letter of interest, the first thing they talked about was, and something Brittany had said earlier too, is, what is your why, and, who are you as an artist, and asking yourself what's your why. I think that you need to start asking yourself now, even before you start looking at these calls. I know sometimes we look at these calls that come up and we're looking at what it is, and we're looking at how much it pays or what neighborhood it is, and I want to do that. But start developing who you are as an artist now. And it may not be who you are as a studio artist. It may not be who you are as an Etsy artist or whatever your craft is. As a public artist, who are you? So for me, as an artist, before I did any public art work, I was commission-based. What do you want? I'll do it for you. It doesn't matter how I feel about it. I'm not really inserting a whole lot of myself. I'm inserting my talent, but not necessarily my voice. After I started doing public art, now it's about giving voice to those who don't necessarily have a voice. I've completely rebranded myself now. So like in my call with the Dallas, like Gabrielle talked about earlier, I had those numbers on there. Those numbers correlated with the resume. So you saw 1, that was the resume. And then I talked to you about how it all was community-based because they wanted to be community-based. When I talked about my letter of interest, I talked about how I am a urban art, well, I didn't say urban art, I said an urban storyteller. That's what I've phrased myself as now. I'm an urban storyteller. So I'm giving voice to marginalized communities. That's who I am as an artist. That's important to me. What's important to you? If you develop what's important to you first, it'll be easier for you to make that case and identify which calls match you. The other thing I'll say is one thing that you should pay attention to specifically with UAC. UAC does a beautiful thing in their open calls that I've seen them do time and time again. When you interview for a job, or you get ready to interview for a job, one of the first things that you do, say you're applying for a job, even before you interview, and you're doing a letter of interest, one of the first things you do is you go back to the application, right? And you see what are they asking for, right? It don't matter if that's what you're trying to give them or not. You go back and see what are you wanting? Like, what do we expect? Oh, well, I'm going to give you what you expect, so I'm going to reiterate what you say. UAC, in their open calls, they talk about what that open call is asking for. So if you're not saying in your letter of interest that you're giving, if it doesn't match what they're already asking for, you already are not on the right track. You're like, they even give like details about the community with the founding, all that stuff.
We do the
Yeah.
research so that we can help you start
Yeah.
to research if you need to. So just to put you out there on something, so you have something contextual around that neighborhood, that project, that organization, whatever it is, we try to give a little bit more. So thank you for that.
Right. Definitely pay attention to that. And also note too that UAC also makes sure that that we're being equitable in the city. So be aware that some of the communities that you're dealing with, like for instance Westwood, and I can say this because I'm from Westwood and it's factual. Westwood is one of the more underrepresented communities in the city. My point is that there are some communities and neighborhoods who have not experienced the opportunity to get public art for many, many, many years, or if ever. And so they are vicious with what they want. And they're not leaving room for anything, whatever you have in your head about what you're trying to do, there's no room for that, because this is their opportunity to get what they're asking for. So if you're not open to giving them what they're asking for, they will smell it, and you're going to be in the no pile. Okay? So just be aware of that when you're looking at these open calls. I'm done.
Now, that's a great point. I think to that point, there are many needs in our city. And I think sometimes, even as a UAC employee, navigating the needs and wants of communities as opposed to what we can actually offer can be difficult. And I think I find excitement and enthusiasm in the fact that we do get to sit and listen to people who don't necessarily always get heard or have a chance to tell what it is that they want, what it is that they need. And so to me, I think that's the start. And so you should be proud of yourselves for coming into this room, into this space, wanting to listen, wanting to advocate on behalf of others, wanting to give voice, or not give voice, but to help amplify the existing voice, to give platform to. And so that is commendable in itself, even if you at the end of this meeting are like, actually, I don't know if I do want to do that. But you started off, you tried it, you experimented a little bit, even in coming here today. So I do want to say you should pat yourself on the back for that. That's really great. And that means that our city, Memphis, is doing much better than people would try to say. So
So I just quickly want to give you like an example of that, like how that shows up in real time, right? So you have an idea for a project, you submit that idea, you're chosen for that project, now you're in front of the selection committee, you're presenting your proposal, and they say, I don't like that color, I don't like these two trees, rather have magnolias, right? And there's a list, blah, 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 blah. So what we're saying is, at that moment, as the artist chosen for that call, you have to be nimble. You have to say, okay, I see your vision too, right? Because at this point, in a lot of ways, you haven't necessarily talked to them yet. They've only been seeing your work through, digitally. So this is the opportunity where you're just now in front of them cultivating a relationship. I've seen it time and time again, right? I've seen it as an employee of UAC. I've seen it as someone who is married to a muralist.
You better bring him up.
Right? Who often is spending a lot of time in the design phase, which is why you're paid for the design phase, because it is a back and forth. It's a conversation that you're having with the committee around their ideas, around your ideas, and then how do we marry those, right? How are we then, in some cases, that, periwinkle blue you wanted may not be in there. And you got to be okay with it. So when you're entering into public art, know that this is not your studio practice. Whereas when you're in your studio, you get to make whatever you want. When you're entering into public art, you're entering into a relationship with the public, which is very different, right? Which means that you have to be able to co-curate and co-create with a group of people. If that is not your jam, I'm gonna tell you right now, if it's not your jam, I don't know if public art is for you, and I want to be really honest with you about that, because it's not all artists' jam. right?
Can we take it a step?
Let's keep
let's take
walking.
what she just said a step forward. So in the Westwood, I have to laugh because it wasn't funny at the time. It's still not funny, but it's funny in this moment. The Westwood mural that I'm currently working on, the one that I showed in the picture, it's 2 different walls, and I finished one. So what she's talking about, not only can that friction happen, we don't call it friction. Not only can that dialogue, yes, dialogue. Not only can that dialogue happen with the committee, but think about this too. And this has happened in multiple projects. Some of you are aware of different projects that we've had that have had these types of things happen. In Westwood, when I did the mural that I was working on, it got tagged in the middle of me doing it. And this is something we always talk about, like, oh, that was one of my first questions when I first did something for UAC. Well, like, what happens if it gets tags? And they say, well, that doesn't really normally happen. It doesn't normally, and it does not happen normally. They tagged my mural in the middle of me doing it. We did not realize that the wall that I was painting was gang territory, and it was claimed by a particular gang. And I was putting Westwood on the wall. They wanted Doubletree on the wall. Okay. Well, that was a whole thing, right? That's not the committee speaking, but that's the neighborhood speaking. And that can happen in different ways. It can be, that's a very specific thing, but it can just be the response. We've had I know that we've had other projects where the community has said something and there has had to be changes made that didn't come from the committee, that came from the community. So my point is just being aware that things may have to change at the drop of a dime, and you really do, like what Brittany was saying, you do have to be flexible. At the end of the day, when I got finished with that wall, you know what I had to do to keep the people from tagging the wall over and over and over, and I'm just still like hoping they don't. I had to literally put Doubletree on the side beside that was not in my plan. I just had to put Doubletree on the side just so they would stop tagging it. So you just have to be flexible. This is part of being a public artist. It's not your work anymore. It's their work. You're in their neighborhood. It's their stuff. They want to be reflected. So yeah. This will help you if you're trying to become a full-time artist and you want to present your work to the world and want to sit in front of corporations like how you and your husband do, and you want to get that feedback. Start conditioning yourself to be flexible, because if you want to make money from your art, you have got to be flexible, and you have got to be open to what people and community and corporations want. So this is a good thing. It will help you in your, I'm just saying it helped me in my day-to-day practice. I've made way more money since I started being a public artist because I've used the same steps and same experiences in my personal business.
Yeah, and feel free to use UAC's resources that are free and open and available to help craft anything else that you are doing. I know a lot of people do. I do. So I know that it is easy to break things up into chunks. And some of the ways that Tony has mentioned too, that he can attest to the fact that our process is in stages. And even if you are new to the public art sphere and you haven't had an example of a large scale budget to have to manage, that is hard just personally for me. So I think if I were to be blessed with $40,000 all at one time, I may not be able to manage that, and it will slip through your fingers quickly because you will encounter things that you thought you could do, but somebody else is an expert or can do it in half the time, so let me contract that out to them. Or the fact that you can hire fabricators to help in your process is something that I didn't know before I started working in the public art sphere. I thought everyone was like hand carving, cutting, shaving, laser, everything. Like everyone knew how to just have multiple things that they're doing. I did not realize that fabrication was an option. So if you need to save a portion of your budget for someone to be able to come in and do that for you, whatever it is, that is available, but only if you've managed your budget correctly or made padding for that, or added contingency funding for your contingency plan that you will need just in case something happens. But that leads us into our last slide, our last topic, which is quick on the PowerPoint presentation because you have a sheet in front of you with more. But it is researching a call. Every call isn't the one that you should apply for. Just gonna say that and keep saying that. Every call is not for everyone. There are some places where you can, be judicious, be picky, be choosy, because those communities will be picky and choosy. They will have a lot of options. Make sure that you guys match. It's kind of a matchmaking process, because you'll be in it, again, for the long haul. And calls with larger budgets don't necessarily equal more money in your pocket. Just to let you know, I think in the first session, I think I said this again too, but the money is not your money. Just to say it out there, like, it's $120,000 budget. That doesn't mean that I, Gabrielle Brooks, am receiving $125,000. It means that I have to go through and budget and make sure to try to pay myself and salvage something out of that budget for myself. I know artists personally, not necessarily with our projects, but just picking up projects throughout the country, who have attested to, at the end of this project, I will have $5. I will have, $100 to work with. We can go get a bite to eat afterward to celebrate. This is something that, again, this is heart work. This is care for your community. This is something that you want to be a part of. And not to say that that is the result of every project, but just be prepared for understanding that the budget is for the project itself, not for you as an artist.
Talking about that budget, because I think that if you're trying to break into the public art space and you're not really familiar with the budgets, what she was saying is there's so many pitfalls to those budgets that I think that you guys really should consider when you start seeing those really like higher budgets. Be wary. Really have a conversation with yourself about, can you manage the budget? It's not what you may think it is. If you have like the mural I'm doing in Westwood, it's the whole thing is like 500 feet long. I started that mural, I don't even know, last year. I started last summer, y'all. My point is that if the project is 50,000, you're like, oh yeah, 50,000, let me buy me a Benz. Okay, well, if it's going to take you 2 seasons because you can't paint, you know how Memphis weather is. Like actually you don't know how Memphis weather is because all over the place, but you can't paint in certain months here outside. You can't paint below 50 degrees. So, if you're going to have to take that, over the span of a whole year to do it, what does that $50,000 equate to at the end of it? How much did you really make? Do you have other projects to do in the meantime? Do you have the flexibility to come back to it after the summer and the winter? Like, that's what I'm doing with Westwood. I did one wall and now I'm coming back to it now, but I had the flexibility to do that. Do you? Do you have staff that's going to come back and help you? If somebody comes and tags it, can you do it again? Do you have the budget in your paint? Your paint budget, your paint. It's so many different things that you have to think about with that budget. It may sound like a lot of money, but it really is not. Yes.
What was the most expensive part in terms of like murals in your experience of making a mural? Is it hiring people to come and help you? Is it paint? Is it like other equipment? If you need like scaffolding or like a ladder, like what's like the most expensive part?
It really does depend on what the project is. I mean, if you're talking about a project so for instance, the Westwood project that I'm doing, it didn't need any scaffolding. Like, I can get to every single part of it with a ladder, but it's a huge mural. And so we're talking about 500 feet. And so I'm going through a lot of paint. So for this mural, my largest bill has been paint. I've had to use layer after layer of paint just to get the images, and it's going on concrete. Think about what your canvas is. Painting on drywall is not the same thing as painting on concrete. We had to have conversations about, there's another thing too. Like when you're looking at these projects, think about the condition of your canvas. I was painting over an old mural that had been painted 20 years ago. A company came out and pressure washed that mural off. And then I primed it and then started painting. Well, one wall they pressure washed it so much to get that mural off, they damaged the wall where there were big craters and holes in it. So then I had to come back and ask, can we fix that? That was another cost. So it's just, what I'm saying is, start talking to other artists that are doing these projects as you guys are preparing to apply to them. There are just so many unknowns, and you need to have budget left over. If you're planning on spending every single penny of that budget, it's not a good project for you.
I would also say too, in our next workshop, we're gonna cover budget extensively. We're gonna cover the proposal, like you've got the call, so now what? So we're gonna cover a lot of that. But to answer your question quickly, I've seen a large expense and line item with scissor lifts.
Yes, scissor lifts.
Highly expensive. So a scissor lift is, it's the equipment that you get on and it rises, right? It's not the ladder, but the mechanism, right? And there are different types of scissor. But not only will you need to rent a scissor lift depending on the size of the wall, you also have to get insurance for yourself.
Sometimes
certifications for yourself and your team to be on the scissor lift. Not only that, you have to hold the insurance for a certain amount of time, right? So it depends on the scope of the project. But I've seen the budget of different projects that I've worked on, and again, my husband is a muralist, where that scissor lift costs and additional labor costs, right? Bringing in other people tend to be a bit higher. But when you're planning out for your project, you always want to have a contingency line, which is for emergency, so to speak, because you never know what's going to happen. And also as seasons progress, or if you're working on a project for multiple years, inflation happens. So whereas paint was, $20 a gallon, now it's $35 a gallon, right? So all of those things are important, but we'll talk about budget more extensively in workshop 3 to make sure that we're covering a lot of this information. So be sure to come back for that.
I wanted to say one real quick thing you made me think about. You were talking about hiring staff and stuff. Y'all also think about when y'all are applying for these open calls and where you're doing the work and how you're doing the work. And say what I'm really thinking about is thinking about our outside murals. Consider if you're going to be comfortable doing the work. Make sure that you're comfortable doing the work. If you're not an outdoor, if you haven't done murals outdoors before, you may want to shadow a mural artist and see what that's like. You may want to add in into your thought process having someone with you. You may be doing work in an area that you're not familiar with or comfortable with, or that may not be necessarily safe. It may be a lot of traffic. You may be working in an area that's just dangerous, and you need to, because we're in the city, so you need to make sure you're okay with that, because once you take ownership of that mural, they're going to want to see it. They're not going to be going to talk about, whoever walked over and said something. I don't care about all that.
Yep. Also, too, if you want to apply for a call and this is your first one, team up. Yes. Artist teams can apply for a call. So if you've got a person that you feel like, okay, boom, here we are, artist team number 1, right? Yes. If you've got a person in your network that you feel like you can work well with, right? They have a certain skill set, you have a certain skill set, y'all team up. Go after these projects together until you can get some wins under your belt, and then maybe you decide that you might want to separate thereafter, but you don't have to apply alone. You can team up. And then also too, if you want to do a mural project and you're not comfortable maybe on a scissor lift, right? You can pay somebody to install your mural. I know mural artists and I know folks all the time who design a mural and they pay an installer, but you need to allot that in your budget, right? Because that's just like hiring a fabricator or hiring help, so to speak.
Explain what you mean when you say installing a mural.
Sure. I'll give you an example. I don't know if it's actually still up, but in the Uptown area, Cara did a mural, and it's not up anymore, but I can still give you the example. But she did a mural for a really tall, it was super tall. And Cara was like, no thanks. So she hired someone to install, she designed it, right? Got it approved, talked with the selection committee, did all that work. And then she hired an installer to install her work, right? There's a artist here that I know very well. He does a lot of that, right? He's like installs murals for artists after they've got their designs approved. So it's a thing.
If you guys are interested in teaming up, but you're not sure where to start or who to ask, please email us and we will play matchmaker, because I have lots of people already who have been emailing. Also opportunities to maybe even work with international artists, national artists, because UAC, due to our mission and our strategic plan over the last 5 years, all of our calls have been local. And so that was to amplify local artists, Memphis-based artists, and to make sure that we were doing our due diligence there. But increasingly, we have had so many people who do not call Memphis home who would like to be able to be a part of these projects, to have somewhere to start. And so something that I love to say is, partner with a Memphis-based artist. And then they are like, well, I don't know anybody in Memphis because I don't live there. And so if we were able to start that conversation for you to be able, and I don't know, if the personalities will match, but maybe the work styles will, or something else could spark something else. And so if you are open and willing and want to be in that sort of database for people to be able to access and learn about Memphis through you, so that they could possibly pair up to be a part of a project and kind of circumvent that eligibility requirement, that is there and also available.
So we're coming up on a close. We want to make space for questions, and then we also just want to briefly remind you of the calls that are open. So let's go ahead and take questions.
One question about pairing up with someone for a call. Do you have any advice on the application process when you're collaborating with someone who is like a good friend, you've been friends for a while, but you've never collaborated before?
So the question is advice on how you all might present your work together?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So I've seen it done to where, and this might be, it's interesting because I've seen my first stylized proposal was two artists coming together, and so that's how they actually made their proposal to look coherent. But I mean, you would need to include both of everything. So both of your resumes need to be included. You only need to write one letter of intent, right? But your images, so UAC asked for 10 to 20. We need at least 10 of your work, 10 of this other person's work. And then 2, I would say in the letter of interest, it might be key to talk about how your different styles will merge, right? Or how your different styles will echo each other, or how your different styles will then produce this new style that's cool and wonderful, right? So in your letter of intent, part of maybe your opportunity would be, how does my work and this other person's work really lift the scope of the call, and how are we going to work together to marry our practice in a way? And then even a bonus, right, if you got time, would be to do something together. Draw, maybe collaborate on a 2D piece. If you're a painter or illustrator, I don't know, but if you've got time, maybe y'all work on something that is 2-dimensional together. Maybe it's digital. Both of y'all work it in Procreate. I do a little bit here, I do a little bit there. And you might submit that as an image of your work if you have time, right? But if not, I think your letter of interest is where you're going to need to shine on how y'all are going to work together.
And not only your pieces, she was talking about your experiences as artists and who you are. You may be somebody who's from a particular area, born and raised, whereas somebody else may have moved here from a different place. You may talk about the juxtaposition between the two and how how that adds to the call. So also your experience too, as artists separately and together too.
Thank you all so much for joining us for the UAC Artist Workshop Series Session 2. We will be back here in our office space again at 422 North Cleveland Street on July 26th, which is another Wednesday. And thank you so much for joining us. Yay!